Cambridge Film Show.
Cambridge Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Cambridge Film Show, your fortnightly guide to the latest movie releases on the big screen and small. I'm your host Luke Irwin, and with me today are three reviewers ready to get stuck in to tell you what's worth your time, what's worth a miss, and whether we should all just go back to the IMAX to see The Odyssey again. It's hello to Stewart Paske.
Hello.
Catherine Stockton.
Hello.
And Emma Marchant.
Hello there.
While the three of us talk about this week's reviews and the rest of the team are taking a well-earned summer break, we'll be delving into the just one big screen release that's come out in the last 2 weeks. That is Tom Holland and Zendaya back in the cinema screens for Spider-Man: A Brand New Day. The pair, currently featured in the aforementioned Odyssey as well, are swarming our cinemas like a swarm of ants on a hot day. But if you thought that it was a slim week for films, luckily the home streaming platforms are here to help. We have a ton of new releases to cover, including a couple of comedies. We have Kevin Hart in the culture class comedy 72 Hours, and Jake Johnston squaring off against tennis ace Andy Roddick in The Dink. Elsewhere, we have a pair of action films, as Bob Odenkirk stars in the gore-tastic crime caper Normal, and Kate Beckinsale leads the way in the British thriller Wildcat. And to round things off, we'll discuss Amazon Prime's latest premiere release, The Devil's Mouth, which belongs in a category all of its own. Stay tuned to find out why. But we begin today's show with a trip to the cinema and the iconic Spider-Man.
What is happening to me?
Did you miss me, Spidey? I'm losing my mind. I am totally out of control. I gotta fix whatever this is right now.
Final semester MIT.
Dad, who do you think is actually watching these?
Maybe someone.
Okay, well, bye, someone.
What the? Dr. Banner, you found a way to suppress mutating DNA, right?
If you see me with this stuff, run.
So could you get rid of the bad aspects but keep the good?
How would you decide what parts of nature are good or bad?
Sorry about that.
You're not one of my students, are you?
Following his recent epic adventures through both time and space, which has forced Peter Parker to make great sacrifices that has left him all alone in the world, he goes back to his roots as a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, keeping New York City safe from hoodlums. However, the pressures of isolated life soon spark a surprising physical evolution that affects his web-slinging activities. At just the time, a strange pattern of new crimes gives rise to one of the most powerful threats that he's ever faced. Stu has seen this one, and before we get into the review, it's worth giving some backstory here. There's been a lot of turnover in the MCU since the Avengers Endgame some 8 years ago, which has seen a lot of Marvel's big stars either step away from the series. But the one exception to that is Spider-Man. It's Tom Holland, who's been Spider-Man now for the past 10 years, and as much as the MCU has struggled over the past 10 years to maintain its place as a big blockbuster staple, Spider-Man is not one of those films. The last film, No Way Home, was an absolutely smash hit, and this one appears to be very popular amongst the critics. Stu, as the title Brand New Day suggests, though, the series is shifting tones, so does this version of Spider-Man maintain what has made the character so popular through all these years?
I think so. I think it's done a really, really good job of returning the character of Spider-Man to his comic book roots. He was sort of thrust into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the midst of the events in the sort of Thanos story arc. So they skipped the traditional Spider-Man intro story, which got repeated a couple of times in the Tobey Maguire and the Andrew Garfield films. And so now this is sort of returning to sort of the traditional Peter Parker Spider-Man tropes, which are Spider-Man can't be Spider-Man unless Peter Parker is miserable. And he has really set himself up for a fall following the events of Far From Home. I lose track, the last one.
Yeah. They've all got home in the title, which makes it more confusing.
No Way Home, that's right. No Way Home, thank you, yes. So he's basically, at the end of No Way Home, he's basically to eliminate the threat that was sort of created by a magic spell in the previous one. The only remedy to that was for everyone to forget who Peter Parker was, including his nearest and dearest. His Aunt May had passed away. His friends don't know who he is, so he is literally on his own. And this film is set 4 years after the event of that, so he's been doing his best to make do over that time, and he's got a rubbish little apartment in New York City. He's got a sort of a loose-knit group of new friends, Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, being one of them in New York City, played by John Bernthal, who is also in The Odyssey. And so it's really gritty, and it really helps to sort of deliver some emotional heart to this film. It really makes you feel more sympathy than you've had for, or needed to have for, Tom Holland's Peter Parker throughout all of the films to date within the context of the MCU. He's not off jet-setting with Avengers in outer space. He's not fighting interdimensional multiversal threats. He's just trying to get by as a street-level crime fighter.
And this film does something that the series hasn't had the courage to do yet so far, which is to have Tom Holland truly lead this film. In previous iterations of Spider-Man, they've made them sort of quasi-Avengers films, as he has an older mentor character. But this really is Tom Holland taking the reins here, and he's got a lot of not just the wit that we see, the sort of the teenage gumption of the younger version. He's dealing with a lot of emotion here, and I think people will be surprised at how the tone here has shifted. It becomes far more dramatic, doesn't it?
It's right, yeah. I mean, it's a lot darker in tone, and that sort of comes with the sort of shift from that sort of fantastical MCU world, more in line with perhaps what we've seen on the small screen. So we think of the Netflix series which have been sort of incorporated in MCU: Daredevils, Punishers, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, that sort of thing. And they lean a lot more on that. So there are ninjas in this, for example, ninjas that were traditionally villains of Daredevil and Iron Fist. They're now sort of integrated into this New York that we now find ourselves in. But that also works really well, because the director of this film, which is Destin Daniel Cretton, was the director of Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, which of course was the martial arts flick, so it had some fantastic fight choreography, and that's come on to hand in this film as well, because the street level fighting is very heavily choreographed, whether it's got the physicality of fighting ninjas or the slightly more fantastical elements of fighting some other sort of more super level threats.
Yeah, I was so relieved to see Spider-Man in New York swinging around on the skyscrapers and battling villains, and it felt so much more grounded than anything we've seen. I think one thing that you go back to here is talking about some of these characters that appear from the comic books. I have not watched much of the Marvel TV series, so I don't know anything about Frank Castle. I don't really know about a lot of these supporting players. You get the Scorpion turns up, played by Michael Mando, and I must admit that I was a little bit overwhelmed by the breadth of backstory here. And I think this film's trying to do it's trying to reset and make it a standalone story, but it's also doing a lot of stuff for fans of the wider canon. Do you think this film, if you're like me, and you've watched some Spider-Man films only once, can you go into this film without having to do it? The old Avengers thing about having to do all the research, go back and rewatch all the films. How much do you need to know? For example, John Bernthal as the Punisher. Do we need to figure that out?
So when John Bernthal's the Punisher, Frank Castle, comes into play, he sort of screeches in an armoured truck from a side street, so he's straight into the action. So even if you don't necessarily know who the Punisher is, I think his introduction to the big screen is bold enough to sort of introduce him and what he's about in a very short period of time. Obviously, as with all these things, you will benefit from having seen some of the other stuff. So, for example, only a month or so ago, there was a new one of the Marvel one-shots on Disney+, which was Punisher: One Last Kill, which was a standalone, sort of almost like a recap of what this character's about. And it was like a 90-minute sort of tight-knit corridor shooter with some interesting camera work of its own. So if you haven't seen that, go see that out. If you want to learn more about John Berthnell's character before you see this film, go and see that on Disney Plus, because that's very good in its own right.
Yeah.
But that said, it is a very odd character shift for the Punisher from all that other stuff we've seen on Netflix and Disney Plus, in that he becomes a lot more friendly, which seems like the antithesis of what he's about. But he seems to have been mellowed by Peter Parker in his interactions in the 4 years since we've last seen Spider-Man. He's found a sort of a kindred spirit, but also perhaps he's found someone who sort of represents some lost innocence, which he can relate to and makes him feel a bit more human again, which I think is a really nice touch. And you see that as well, and you see it on the press tours as well. In all the press junkets and things, they've had Peter Parker and Tom Holland and John Berthnell side by side doing all the press junkets, and they are really good mates. John Berthnell's known Tom Holland since he was 17 years old, and so that chemistry really comes on the screen as well, and it adds to that sort of emotional depth to the film.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I think when the two of them are on screen together, the film absolutely shines. But speaking of chemistry, I think a lot of people are going to be curious about Zendaya, Tom Holland's real life wife. Now they're now married. Watching some of these Spider-Man films reminds me here's a top-notch cultural reference for you. In the TV series Friends, Joey has this mad theory that if a couple have great chemistry together off screen, that can't carry over on screen. And I don't necessarily I think that often feels the way. When I see Tom Holland and Zendaya in press interviews, I think brilliant couple. But when I see them together on screen, I often don't see it. And they've got a really hard job here, because, as you mentioned, at the end of the previous film, they do this magic spell by Zendaya and Tom Holland, or Zendaya, can't remember Peter Parker's character. But you're wondering how they're going to handle that. How are they going to rebuild this relationship? Are they going to attempt it? Zendaya is in this film. She has pretty high billing. I'm not sold. I'm still not sold on their relationship on screen.
I actually think the chemistry on screen is really impressive. I think and that's, again, someone who watches a lot of these premieres and red carpet events and things, and you see Tom Holland and Zendaya side by side, and actually they seem quite private people. Tom Holland's always quick to step in front of Zendaya if the paparazzi are getting a bit too shirty, a bit too forward, but they tend to keep quite contained. They don't really show much chemistry in those scenarios. You only ever really see the chemistry, at least I don't really see it unless I'm seeing them in a film together, but that I always enjoy. It's always very sort of pop pop pop. They always sort of have a good rhythm together, and they continue even now in this sort of following the events of the previous film. They don't know each other. Obviously Peter Parker knows MJ, and he's trying to reach out, with an olive branch and try and re-establish that, but of course she doesn't know who he is, so there's some resistance there. And because of how MJ's character is portrayed as being a very sort of strong-willed, independent feminist, she is like, no, who's this weirdo trying to edge his way back into my life? But Peter Parker is and he's a nice lad. He's not too sort of off-putting, so he sort of finds a way back in, and that sort of develops over the course of the film. Yeah,
I mean, I was surprised at the direction they took with that. That I think they do work hard to that, because ultimately Spider-Man is always a romance story. Like you look at the Spider-Man, I don't know if there's an equivalent of Bond girls, he's got MJ and he's got Gwen Stacy, and you think back to the Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, I thought absolutely made that film. And then when they did The Amazing Spider-Man, they brought in Mark Webb, talk about normative determinism, who had done 500 Days of Summer to try and make that film far more of a romantic comedy. And Dustin Daniel Cretton has not been a romance guy, he's been a drama guy. I mean, when he did Shang-Chi, that was a change of direction for him. And I think for me this plays more of a romantic drama than a romantic comedy.
Oh yeah, I think there's some truth in that. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a very comical film. There are wisecracks and there are humorous moments, but they're mostly between sort of Peter Parker and Frank Castle. That's where the real sort of comedy in this film is. But for them, it's more sort of drama. It's more like sort of tragic, really, than sort of comical, because obviously dealing with some sort of unrequited feelings there, because one of them doesn't remember who the other one is.
Yeah. I think we've got a couple more supporting players that I think are worth mentioning. Trammell Tillman, who people will know from Severance, has a pretty small role in this, and Sadie Sink, who I think plays sort of an unnamed character in this. I thought both of them were real delights as supporting roles, and I don't think we can say too much about who Sadie Sink is playing.
I think that would be a massive spoiler to give away, because they've been very sort of tight-lipped on who she portrays in this, because it sets up a lot of what's to come.
Don't check the IMDb cast list then, people.
Yeah,
is it listed on that? Yeah, so I deliberately stayed away from...
Maybe don't say it, because people would be...
Yeah. I stayed away from it, and I was... Like, it was one of the few moments in an MCU film where I was absolutely shocked at what happened. I thought this was superbly executed.
I had a few ideas, because I'm a big nerd and I know these things, but I wasn't certain, and so I didn't want to go away and spoil that for myself. But there was one sort of running sort of red herring throughout the film, which that they talk a lot about, sort of something called, was it VMAX or something, which like, surely they can't be introducing that now. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But it sounded like a nod to a certain other Sony Marvel attempt, which, you know.
I have to say that one passed me by, and I think it'll pass by a lot of casual viewers. But it still worked for me. So I think overall it's a glowing positive review from you.
I think it is as good. Perhaps not quite as good as the previous one, but you know, it's a fantastic movie. And when I went and saw it in the cinema, it was a full screen. Some people even applauded at the end. Yeah. And you know, whilst I'm sort of that awkward person who like finds applauding in a cinema awkward into itself, I had a really good time.
Can I ask one question? I haven't seen it, but I was going to say, does it also make a case for itself with the massive success of Into the Spider-Verse and Miles Morales Spider-Man films that have been shown recently? Does this make a case for itself to sort of it's bringing back another level of Spider-Man? Because I feel like the Into the Spider-Verse films smashed the critics, smashed the viewers. People loved it. I believe it was several of our viewers' film of the year. Has this kind of made a case to maintain the Tom Holland Zendaya universe as well?
I mean, there are a lot of stories out there in the press at the moment, sort of some backhanded compliments saying, "Oh, it's a really good film, but Tom Holland's a bit old now." It's like, is he though? Because you know, there's just, over the course of the comics, there's so much of sort of Peter Parker Spider-Man's life from high schooler all the way through to sort of young adult, and we're only just sort of reaching the point of young adult now. He's only just sort of university age or college age in America. I think there's more time, and there is a shot of a person in this film who could indeed be Miles Morales, future Spider-Man, but in the timeline, he's still far too young. He's just a child on someone's shoulders. If indeed that's what they're making reference to in that particular shot.
I also think, given just how monumentally successful this film has been, like we started this review by talking about how the MCU has struggled. This is the highest grossing opening day of any film in history. Sony are not going to let Tom Holland walk away from this anytime soon. So if you want to watch Spider-Man Brand New Day, it's a Certificate 12A, and I believe it's showing at all 3 Cambridge cinemas, but not in the IMAX, unfortunately, because Christopher Nolan still has this stranglehold on those screens. And that, if you can believe it, is the only new cinema release in Cambridge in the past 2 weeks. But luckily, it's been a big week for streaming, and we'll devote most of today's show to the films you can watch from the comfort of the small screen, starting with one that, spoiler alert, I absolutely loved.
Tennis, elegance, aesthetic perfection. She needs our protection. An epidemic is sweeping across our once great nation, and its name is
Pickleball.
Yeah. Here's your pickleball. In the garbage. This is a tennis club, lady.
My name is Dusty Boyd.
You're crushing these old people, Dusty.
But most people know me as the Hammer.
How come you work for your dad teaching 9-year-olds?
He's the guy that almost beat Andy Roddick.
That was the trailer for The Dink, a new comedy currently streaming on Apple+. It stars Jake Johnston as a former tennis prodigy, Dusty Boyd, who never quite made it big and is now working as a tennis coach at a country club operated by his dad, played by the forever irascible Ed Harris. Things are complicated when Dusty suffers an injury and, under doctor's orders, takes up pickleball, which the club considers to be barely a sport but a pastime for the elderly and unfit. But when Dusty discovers that the much derided pickleballers are far kinder and welcoming than his own father, and forming a particularly close bond with an older woman played by Mary Steenburgen, he finds his loyalty split. Does he continue to chase the acceptance of his father and the tennis community, or embrace this strange new game? Emma, you watched this one. I hope that we're going to start on our strong foot here. I love Jake Johnston, and I think he carries this film superbly.
Well, I don't know Jake Johnson all that well, although funnily enough he does of course voice one of the many Peter Parkers, trying it back to Spider-Man, in the Into the Spider-Verse. But I'm vaguely aware of New Girl, which I think is where he really made his name, right? But my goodness, he is a charming comic presence. I feel that the Dink is fitting in this new subgenre we seem to be getting of like washed up comedic sports people. We've got the Hawk that's just, hasn't had great reviews. This is the Will Ferrell show on Netflix where he's playing a professional golfer. We had Stick with Owen Wilson on Apple TV. This is a film, but it's the same kind of thing. You've got a slightly menschy, sort of a loser, but, schlubby, but his heart of hearts, he's a really nice guy and he was really good at sport. Now we're going to do something different. I find it really funny because, being of an age, my husband is a member of the local tennis club and we have a friend who now is sort of like smashing his way through the pickleball because as a 54-year-old he's like considered the youngest. He's the star of their pickleball league because, as we know, it is sort of a sport for older people, unless you're Andre Agassi and Steffi Graf. I really enjoyed this. I just thought it was good-natured. I enjoyed the sort of vague May-September romance between Mary Steenburgen and Jake Johnson, because also Mary Steenburgen, who ever since I think Step Brothers is kind of like the mum that you would always want to have, is just also a delight in this. I could watch Ed Harris read the phone book, as people say. You've got some really good cameos. Andy Roddick is really in this film, and he is funny. He's a worthwhile part at the end. It doesn't rewrite the playbook. It doesn't do anything too exciting, but what it does with a really good spirit, and it does really honestly, and I liked it. And it has a lot of country music in it as well. So that was sales.
I mean, the country music was maybe the one part of the film that I didn't particularly care for.
Got to get on board with that, Lou. We're all going country.
Now, Catherine, Emma's mentioned in passing this Mary Steenburgen playing Candace, I think her name is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do something really interesting with the chemistry of those two. And I'm assuming, based on the look on your face, that you didn't find that as interesting.
So I really enjoyed her portrayal, and I actually did think they had a really nice chemistry, and I really liked the kind of friendship romance between the two leads. However, it became a movie about that plot and diverged quite a lot from what I thought was going to be like an interesting, like almost like exploring a religious schism between pickleballers and tennis players, and how they're kind of trying to hit the same ball over the same net, but they're doing it in very different ways, and how people have become very angry about this. And the film spent a lot of time kind of setting that up and then maybe moving away from it in a way that I was then lost as to what I was watching. And then it returned at the end, and as Emma said, there's like a formula to it that it follows, and we kind of get the kind of sports comedy formula, and it does it quite energetically and quite well.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, films like this, they always do have to thread that fine line between doing the sports comedy and doing the obligatory, or in this case, quasi-romantic subplots.
Yes.
Stu, you watched this as well, didn't you? One thing that really stood out for me was the depiction of tennis on the big screen, and indeed pickleball. I think films like this, I mean, I've picked up on sports films that get sports wrong all the time, and when you have so much tennis and pickleball on screen, I think you need, there are parts of it where it's like, oh, like is Jake Johnson a real, like has he played tennis? I don't know whether you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, I'm not a big sportsman. I'm not a big sports fan or man. So for me, watching any sports film, it's got to be sport adjacent rather than directly about the sport itself. And this falls into the sport adjacent camp, I think. So it happens to have pickleball and tennis in it. They're like the sort of their sort of narrative points, but it's not a film about the game. It is a film about people who play these games, and that's where I prefer to watch these sorts of films. If it was like a sort of a biopic about a sportsman, you'd lose me straight away. But this is it's not overly sporty.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just my issue then, because I remember watching Marty Supreme and thinking there's not enough table tennis in this movie. And then maybe I find sports comedy too prescriptive. I'm like, there's going to be a lot of sport, and then when there's not, I'm like, where's all the sport?
I'm enjoying comparing Marty Supreme to The Dink, though, because I did have very different experiences. Marty Supreme was like one of the most frenetic experiences I've had with the cinema, but this. I also, can we just shout out very quickly Aaron Chen playing PJ, who is sort of the sage. He's sort of like Jake Johnson's best friend. I mean, I like the fact that everybody in this film, you've got no idea how any of them would have got to know each other or hang out with each other. It's quite disparate.
Yeah, but Ben Stiller is in this as well. He's got a cameo, but he also produced it. And of course, he brought us Dodgeball, which is another, it's not really a sport film, but it's a comedy sort of sport film that happens to be adjacent to sport.
Yeah, and Christine Taylor, his real life. You feel that this was made by a bunch of friends, right? You also get Ben Stiller's wife pops up in it. Oh my goodness, the guy from Cobra Kai pops up in it, which I was terribly excited about. There are some awesome little cameos.
Yeah, I would say crucially, it feels like a film made by a group of friends, but not self-indulgent in the way that perhaps some of Adam Sandler's films, where you feel like he just wants to go on holiday with his buddies
and his family now.
But Luke, you liked it. It's a dink to see summer for you.
Yeah, I guess that works as a plan. So some of the things I liked about it, I thought that Andy Roddick is so, like, I don't think I've seen him in it. Like, the only other cultural reference point I have is when he lost to Roger Federer in the final of Wimbledon and cried. And I thought it was so like, he was considered like the all-American pro. He was the new great hope of American tennis, and he wore his baseball cap backwards, and then he lost and he started crying, and I thought he endeared himself so much to me for that. And the fact that he's in this film playing an absolutely awful man, I just thought it was a really nice touch. And I also John McEnroe pops up, and I was really worried that they were going to do that. Oh, is he going to turn up and say you can't be serious and do that?
No, it was excellent.
Yeah. And I thought he pops up a couple of times in a running gag, and each time was funnier than the last, and I felt somewhat guilty about how many times I laughed at a version of the same joke.
I think you should do the figure, because I enjoyed the fact that it's a joke about McEnroe the commentator as opposed to McEnroe the player, because obviously McEnroe's been a commentator now for 20 years. The player, people won't remember him necessarily as a player. The audience that are watching this, it was a super affable streaming film, and compared to some of the others that we're going to be talking about, I think that says a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. That is The Dink, a certificate 12 on Apple Plus. I mean, it's a huge thumbs up from me, sort of kind of thumbs up from everyone else.
No, I say thumbs up.
Yeah, but I've got 3 thumbs up. That's how much I like the film.
Moments where I had to rewind and go back, and like that was really genuinely very funny. So
there we go. There, maybe it rewards a second viewing. And more about second viewings in the second half of today's show. Next up, we are shifting tones wildly with Amazon Prime's latest crime thriller.
Your little girl is coming with me, Ada. 6 a.m. tomorrow. Bring $500,000 in cash. You really don't want to be late.
Why Charlotte?
They know what you are.
They've taken Charlotte.
We're gonna fix it. Brought some backup.
Curtis.
You've all heard about this war brewing between Mahoney and Mrs. Vine.
2 biggest gangsters in London fighting for the #1 spot.
Only needs a spark and there'll be fireworks.
So if we take down Vine's jewellery store, make it look like it was Mahoney...
They'll be busy fighting a war. Not looking for us.
The voice you heard there was the unrecognisable Kate Beckinsale in Wildcat. She plays a former British military officer who recruits her old team to pull off a desperate heist and save her daughter's life. Emma, you watched this one?
Yes.
How did he? Oh, that doesn't bode well.
Well, this was something I did for the show, Luke. I did it for the show. I think we're going to be talking about Devil's Mouth later on, and that's going to be another actress in there where I used to feel was really... And Kate Beckinsale had such promise as a sort of satirical actress, as a comic actress, such a bright cookie, such a sort of... She was, this was like 20, 25 years ago, being in, one of the... Walt Whitman's a poetry, but Metropolitan, that kind of thing. And then obviously she also is she is a great action here, and that's she'd gone into Underworld, I guess, the Underworld franchise, and it turns out that she can do some stunts. So it just seems that now her career is a sort of ever decreasing circle of cheap action exploitation flicks, of which this is possibly the worst that I've seen. I am going to give a shout out to Stewart, who did the trailers, for finding a trailer in which the F word was not used, because my goodness, this film is just littered with expletives, which I don't, fair enough, I get it, we're meant to be in the rough old London gangster, but really, guys, try and be a bit more imaginative.
You nearly made me do an impression again for the second show in a row.
I wouldn't dream of it.
There was a little bit of editing on some of the trailers
There really must have been. Yeah, so sorry, you were going to ask me.
I would say the comparison this is drawn is early Guy Ritchie. Does that feel generous?
Yeah, it's so generous. That's exactly what it's trying to be. But you know what? We don't need early Guy Ritchie. Guy Ritchie was 30 years ago, and even some of the stuff he's doing now is not so good. And I'm not even sure if you go back and rewatch early Guy Ritchie, you'd be that excited by it as someone sitting here in 2026. It is overly violent. It is revolting. It's weirdly sort of sexual in one bit as well. You've got Charles Dance Charles Dance is completely wasted. My favourite character in it was Tom Bennett, who was I knew mostly from Phone Shop, and when he turned up as just a kind of like dodgy geezer who gets dragged into this unexpected, I was like, oh, finally this is going to be fun. But no, he doesn't last long, so don't get excited. It just Kate Beckinsale's face is, they sort of flashback 10 years, and I think in order to make her look younger, they just give her even more lip fillers. The accent is all over the shop. It's Louis Tan, who I presume they're like Black Ops guys, and basically the premise is they are going to try to get her deaf daughter back, because her deaf daughter has been kidnapped by these evil gangs, because London is apparently under such it's under such terror from these gangs that in fact they even have curfews in the streets of London. But that didn't go well, as Kate tells you in her weird voiceovers. It is just the most bizarre mess of violence that I've seen committed to celluloid for a while, and I've watched quite a lot of these.
I don't think this was committed to celluloid, just as yeah.
But sometimes we do watch, particularly Prime can turn up some really quite fun originals that people might miss. This is not one of them.
Well, there you go. That's one to miss then. That's Wildcat, a Certificate 18, currently showing on Amazon Prime.
Cambridge Radio. This week, the sound of folk returns to Cherry Hinton Hall. Join Cambridge Radio for special coverage of the Cambridge Folk Festival, with unforgettable music, artist interviews, and all the atmosphere from the heart of the festival. From traditional favourites to exciting new voices, we'll bring you closer to the performers, the stories and the songs. Cambridge Folk Festival this weekend on Cambridge Radio. Listen live on Radio Player. Listen to Cambridge Radio on your smart speaker.
Say play Cambridge Radio.
Cambridge Radio.
Cambridge Film Show.
Cambridge Radio.
Welcome back to the Cambridge Film Show on Cambridge Radio. I'm Luke Irwin, and with me today are Emma, Catherine and Stu. If you're just joining us, you've missed a couple of films that may trouble at least a couple of our top 10s of the year. I'm not sure about everyone else, but you can always catch up with today's show and revisit any of our old episodes online. You can find us on the Radio Player app or by searching Cambridge Film Show wherever you get your audio. As for today, we've been rattling through an array of home streaming releases, but before we crack on with the next one, Emma, I have a question for you.
Luke, I'm all ears.
Have you seen The Odyssey?
What a funny question to ask me. Why, yes, indeed I have, Luke.
What did you make of it? So we covered it in depth 2 weeks ago.
I'm so happy that
we felt it was worth coming back to it because this is done absolutely it's still dominating the box office.
Well, and you have two female voices today as well, don't you? Myself and Catherine, to give you a quick feedback.
Yeah, that's more female voices than appeared in 3 hours of the film.
Well, this is very. Although for Christopher Nolan, as you said, as you commented on last week, that's not bad. I had a great time at the Odyssey. I went to go and see it with my husband, who has more knowledge, I would say, of Greek mythology than I do, and my youngest son and his girlfriend, who probably have zero knowledge of Greek mythology, but had a really good time. I think it was always going to be a tough call, a big ask, and I think cinematically it was done really well. As I said, when okay, you picked me up on this before, and the Trojan. I know the Trojan horse is not officially in the Odyssey, but obviously this is a combination of flashing back to PTSD from the Iliad and Matt Damon playing Odysseus's guilt, and my message from it is that generally war is bad, men are bad, and I think it's not. It's generally a reconsidered thing. I think that Odysseus was not a super guy by any stretch of the imagination. He's got a questionable hero throughout Homer's Odyssey and throughout a lot of the takes that have been on that. But I think from someone who learnt about the Trojan horse, let's say 40 years ago, and just in your mind you have them sort of wheeling them on in there and just sort of probably bantering away in the middle of the horse. I think the Trojan horse scene for me, which obviously is a key sort of timestamp for this, was really well done. Samantha Morton said that the transformation scene, the Cersei's transformation scene, also incredibly well done, because again, in your head when they say she transformed into pigs, you kind of think of a Sleeping Beauty, bibbidi bobbidi boop boop, and there they are, they're gone, and it's a very different. But it lacked in certain parts. I think it lacked again. I mean, Cersei is people have been talking a lot about Samantha Morton's performance of Cersei, and rightfully so. But I would really head you towards Madeline Miller's Cersei book from a couple of years ago, which retells, because really in the poem Odyssey, Odysseus stays with her for a full year. They become lovers, and he stays with her for another year. I mean, there's plenty of reasons that Odysseus is not racing back to Penelope. I'm also going to say I really liked Anne Hathaway. I don't think she was giving embittered widow, because I don't think that's what she's meant to be doing, but I thought that she gave stoic queen very well, because that's what she is.
I thought the performances in this film were mixed. I thought
Himesh Patel was really good.
Himesh Patel and John Leguizamo were terrific. I think I just generally have a problem with some of the casting choices.
Benny Safdie.
Well, we don't really see his face.
But you hear it.
But I want we will get another female opinion now.
Oh wow.
We are blessed. So Emma picked up on something that I think is quite important, is that Christopher Nolan's really put a stamp on this film. This is Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, not Christopher Nolan's Homer's The Odyssey. And I think for all the criticisms of this not necessarily being a faithful adaptation, he's definitely doing what he wants to do thematically with this story.
I think we could talk for a while. I think many people could talk for a while about sort of how you update the themes of the Odyssey for 2026, and how you talk about war and genocide and the nature of evil and the insider and the outsider. And I don't have an issue with any director doing what they want with those huge themes. I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but my main experience of watching this film is that a lot of the star-studded cast didn't disappear into their characters. I think particularly Robert Pattinson's Zendaya and Hathaway, I felt like I was always watching them giving a really high-effort, decent performance, but never watching their characters.
I was so surprised at the glowing... Like, I love Robert Pattinson, but I heard someone describe it like he was performing as the human villain in the Muppets Odyssey film. And I thought that was such a great description of what he's doing.
Everything was delivered out of the outermost sort of corner of his mouth in a slanted kind of villain-esque way.
And he wore velvet underpants, apparently, as he's gone on to say. He felt his character would wear luxurious underpants. He's like, he wore fur underpants. They're good friends, aren't they, apparently? Christopher Nolan and Robert Pattinson are now neighbours in Hollywood, so they have movie nights together. I do feel that Christopher Nolan likes to work with the actors he likes to work with. So maybe in some cases, like you say, you'd be better off casting less known faces.
Yes.
To play these roles, because like you say, otherwise it is just a who's list of who's passing you by on the screen. I do want to say, Tom Cruise's camp here, because Tom Cruise is terribly enthusiastic about this, and I think anything that's getting as many bums back in seats this is really good. And as I say, watching it cross-generationally, it cinematically it raced by, 3 hours races by, and it was I think it's edited really tightly, and one of my favourite Christopher Nolan films. Not that I'm a huge fan.
Yeah. I think one thing that's interesting about why this film is getting, this is going to be, until Spider-Man takes over, it's going to be the highest grossing film of the year. It's going to gross more than Toy Story 5 and Super Mario Galaxy movie.
Is that partly because we have to see it in IMAX? Which tickets are more?
I guess so, but I think it is
as
also...
As Nolan intended.
Yeah. I think it's really surprising that a 3-hour film of an adaptation of a Greek poem is so popular. And people think that Christopher Nolan is this huge bastion of cinema, but he's never had a silly bonkers blockbuster hit. Like even Oppenheimer, I mean, it was a big hit for a biopic, but it wasn't crazy money. It wasn't Avengers money, whereas this film will be. And I wonder whether part of that is because people want to see Robert Pattinson. They want to see Zendaya for 30 seconds. They want to see Tom Holland. And I wonder whether there's sort of an internal conflict between you want to have this star-studded film, just have it have this cachet, and then how that actually works on screen.
I mean, you have Samantha Morton, who's not an unknown name by any means, or an unknown face, but she's not quite at the same sort of tier as, say, Zendaya and Tom Holland. But for me, when she comes on in her sort of episodic moment in the Odyssey, it showed up what really like studied, enlivened, engaging, embodied, like proper acting is, and it created a large contrast, I think, with quite a lot of the other performances. So you're right in that there is sort of a mix, but I don't know how much that mix works. But that was my. I
think at the end of the day, it's Matt Damon's film. I mean, honestly, you can worry about, if you're not a fan of any of these actors or concerned about that, some of these performances are a bit lacking. There isn't enough time really to settle into any of the performances other than Matt Damon's, and Matt Damon does a very, very fine, serviceable job.
Excellent. I have one quick question for you both. Have you, or are you planning to watch this film again?
Not planning to. Could be.
Probably not at the cinema. I don't think I'll go back to the cinema.
Yeah.
But I imagine I will watch it again when it comes out. I mean, I feel like I've paid my £20. I went to see it in IMAX. But I would watch it again on when it comes out streaming. Yes.
Yeah. So I think our verdict here is, if you've seen the Odyssey already, you're done. If you haven't, then please go and watch it. It's showing all 3 Cambridge cinemas. And we go back to a brand new film now, fulfilling our quota as a film review show, to see what antics Kevin Hart's up to.
Soliciting, human trafficking, everybody going to jail. Hands on your head.
Maybe guys can clear it up.
This guy is a stranger that is on our bachelor party. He vomited on us, and then we had to get naked.
He's like our friend, but he's older than us. So he's like our daddy.
Guys, you're not helping. You gotta see this. I'm in a random group chat with some guys planning their bachelor party. They're inviting me to Miami? Yeah, they want me to go. My boss thinks I'm getting too old. Sorry, baby. It's fine. This is my opportunity to connect with the youth.
That was the trailer for 72 Hours, a culture clash comedy in which a middle-aged man, played by Kevin Hart, joins a bachelor party weekend with strangers after accidentally being added to the group chat. Now, I have to say, this sounds like a pretty solid idea for a comedy. There's a lot of gold to be mined from making fun of older millennials on Gen Z and just sort of the absurdity of how different their experiences of life is. But many people were going to be put off by hearing Kevin Hart's voice. He's really I would say a Marmite actor, and I'm assuming, Stu, given that you watched this film willingly, that you love Kevin Hart.
I have no strong feelings one way or the other about Kevin Hart.
You've instantly destroyed my thesis there.
He is an actor. He appears in things that I sometimes watch. This is one of those things that I have sometimes watched. What do I think of Kevin Hart? Now, I think he's a fairly amusing chap. He's sort of loud and obnoxious funny in only the way that some American comics can be, and that would be intolerable perhaps in British comics, but American comics seem to get away with it, and he does that very well in this film. He is definitely an interesting sort of take. There's so many angles that you can sort of take the mickey out of him in this film, and he is one of those comics who does allow himself to be taken the mick out of. He is short, he's got a high-pitched funny voice, and this sort of appears to be the perfect vehicle for that, because it is all these Gen Z people out on this stag do who have randomly allowed him along via this accident of allowing him into a group chat where they're planning said stag do, and because he's got money and has offered a nice place to stay if he's going to come at all, because he didn't want to stay in some rubbish sort of bedsit, then it's made for a sort of weird, interesting dynamic, but it's not a fantastic film.
Oh, wow. I don't think any of us were expecting fantastic. Emma, can you tell us about the Gen Z, the rest of the Bachelor party?
The theory behind this is Kevin Hart is once again sort of a man-child with the most oddly cast Tiana Taylor I've ever seen as his girlfriend, who's waiting, trying to get him to commit.
Is this her first film post-Oscar?
It may well be. Wow, that's a choice, Tiana. But she seems to be in an entirely different film, because she seems to be in a very serious film, whereas obviously this is not a serious film. He's an ad exec. He's bombing with his campaigns because he's not in touch with Gen Z anymore. So the whole premise is when he gets invited accidentally, he says, this is great, I can go and get real footage of real Gen Z to be able to, post it to via some Meta glasses, heavy product placement, to be able to give a great pitch. So this is sort of like weird rom-com dynamic in that obviously that he's lying to them, these guys who are becoming his new friends, even with the generational difference. And at some point that's going to come out, and at some point they're going to have to have a reckoning with that. It's a tale as old as time. The Gen Z crowd are played by Marcelo Hernandez and Ben Marshall, who you'll know from Saturday Night Live, I think, who are funny. I mean, well, actually, Marcelo Hernandez was not as funny in this as I found him in other things. I just think it's a bit of a mess.
Are they the guys that do the scripted, the pre-filmed?
Ben Marshall, I think, is part of the pre-film bits. Yeah. Marcelo is now a cast regular. He's now a cast regular, and he's very, very. I'm really enjoying him Saturday Night Live. He was also
Domingo.
Domingo, exactly, yes. Domingo, and he also popped up in Happy Gilmore 2 as the caddy.
Well, I think everyone in North America appeared in Happy Gilmore 2.
This is very true. I can see what this film was trying to do, but it's a bit of it's a mess. There's too much. It throws too much at the palette, too much at the canvas, and not even half of it sticks. I'd say maybe a quarter of it sticks, and maybe part of that is Kevin Hart can only keep doing this sort of obnoxious man-child act for so much longer. The running joke I found was really funny is that everyone keeps saying that he's in his 50s, and he's like, I'm only 42 or whatever. And I did find that quite funny, the whole "you old."
So it sounds like one to watch if you're just you can't get enough of Kevin Hart.
Or Domingo from Saturday Night Live, or Marcelo Hernandez, maybe.
But I also quite like Michael Mando as well.
I spotted him because I did not see Spider-Man, so I enjoyed a little bit of Nacho from Better Call Saul popping back up again.
Hollywood really is small, isn't it?
Exactly.
I don't think there's any film that's got a cast that doesn't have someone sort of slightly incestuous, isn't it?
How young do you have to be to qualify as Gen Z?
I did look this up.
I know for a fact because my youngest is the first year of Gen Alpha. So Gen Z ended in 2009. So I think you're Gen Z if you were born between maybe 1990 something and 2009.
Do we know the earliest date?
Yeah, you've almost answered the question there, but I don't think we have time to get into this, unfortunately.
1997 to 2012.
Oh, well, you see, I disagree with this, because if you look up Gen Alpha, it says 2010. I had an argument with my nephew about this. Anyway,
well, that was 72 hours and some cultural anthropology.
They won't even be millennials.
It's a difficult 15, and it's showing on Netflix. Next up, we see whether Amazon invested wisely after sending off a film crew to shoot in luxurious Thailand.
This is our last adventure together before we all start our real lives. Tomorrow, Devil's Mouth for all of us.
Hello, Swadee Krap. I will be your cave guide today. And does anyone have fear of water or of swimming?
I'm not afraid of the water, just what might be in it.
Wow.
This is Devil's Mouth. Oh. We are guests here.
That was the trailer for The Devil's Mouth, a new horror that sees a bunch of friends take one final holiday together before their paths split. Cue boat trips across gorgeous water, late-night rendezvous on the beach, and, once the plot finally kicks in, a canoe trip through a dimly lit cave that's hiding more than its fair share of secrets. Emma, I'm really sorry that I made you watch this film. Please, this is a safe space.
Never apologise, Luke. There's something for everybody in this show. Is that all you're going to say? You just apologise when you watch it. My word, I mean, I would not have watched it if I wasn't doing this, and it is this odd kind of, it promised so much more than it delivered, and I think my burning question at the end of it is what has happened to Catherine Newton's career, because again, she was in the adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's book. Little Women.
Was she in Little Women?
She was in A Little Women. I swear to God, she was in A Little Women. Although, who knows? I'm making up all kinds of stuff.
She's also in the MCU. She was in Map of Tiny Perfect Things.
Yes, she's Ant-Man's daughter. She is, and this is some of the worst some of the worst acting I've ever seen, some of the worst action I've ever seen. But the problem with this is, the premise is you have these 5 American teenagers who are all sort of, they're on this throw it at the wall trip to Thailand before they all have to go back and start college and decide whether or not they're going to move across the country to be with each other and blah, blah, blah. The problem is not a single one of those teenagers has a single redeeming feature between them. They are singularly the most annoying 5 people ever committed to celluloid. So by the time they are all picked off one by whatever it may be in the cave, because I think when I went into this, I didn't know what it was, and then it turns out to be really simplistic. I was overjoyed.
And then have we actually mentioned what the threat?
Well, you say yes, it's a shark.
Yeah,
it's a shark. Film.
It's a shark that acts nothing like a shark. It's sort of it's very much Jaws for the revenge of it's throwing itself head first into rocks to try and eat these people for reasons that aren't explained.
Yeah, they don't even give you as many reasons as they did in Under Paris, was it? Where there's a shark living under the Seine before they have the Paris Olympics. At least then there was some idea that this shark had come along and been kind of a super shark from genetic mutations. This is just a random shark in a cave. There's some vague blurb about the fact that maybe the bones of the ancestors are on the floor and maybe they're not showing respect to that because they're also obnoxious. But that's not followed up. It's awful.
I would say this film is so bad. If you watched the film Thrash a few months ago, which was absurd, it involved a tornado that upended a truck that was carrying a vat full of blood. I would say that film is more realistic and dedicated to making a sensible shark horror film.
I found this mildly less offensive than Wildcat, and that's all I can say about it. That is literally, and that is the lowest of the low. Also, how sad that Tamer, and apologies for pronunciation, Tamer Thaptinthong, who I believe is an English Thai actor who was to great effect in The White Lotus, the latest season of The White Lotus. How disappointing that he's made this his first choice after that and plays a sort of frankly terrible tour guide called Watt, who should know better from the very beginning.
I wonder if there's a sad aspect of if you're a Thai actor looking for film roles, you're probably not going to get a whole lot. I mean, I would say Lana Condor is in this film, who you'll know from a couple of Netflix things. Really disappointing. I was so disappointed in Catherine Newton. I got the impression that they'd all been on holiday for 2 weeks and then were just exhausted and had to get the filming out of the way.
It reminded me a little bit of Liz Hurley's son's, Damien Hurley's directorial debut we reviewed on here some time ago, where it just clearly seemed that everyone had got together to go to Elton John's house for 2 weeks and make a movie on the side. It felt like this. It's terrible.
Yes, please do not. This is a public service announcement to not watch The Devil's Mouth. It is a Certificate 15 currently showing on Amazon Prime, but I reiterate, do not search for this film.
Two for two fails on Amazon this week. Boo.
Anyway, as a palate cleanser, we're finishing off today's show with Ben Wheatley's new action comedy, and perhaps he can show us how to handle gore.
Why are you here?
I used to be a regular sheriff. I walked through life with my head held high. I kind of stopped trusting my instincts.
Death comes for us all, don't it, lawman?
You've been listening to my internal monologue, haven't you? I took a sheriff job in a little town called Normal, Minnesota.
Weather advisory, a winter storm threatening later this week.
People seem friendly enough. Whoa, 16.8 million. Where the hell did this town get that kind of money?
Community really came together on that one.
Yeah, I would say.
That was the trailer for Normal, named after its small town setting in snowy Minnesota. It stars Bob Odenkirk as Ulysses Richardson, a lawmaker who uncovers a wide-reaching conspiracy that involves everyone from the local government to the Japanese Yakuza. Emma, I hope you had a better time with this one.
I had such a good time with this one. I mean, I have only just, very late to the party, I've just come off a very long watch of Better Call Saul. So, I mean, I think Bob Odenkirk probably wins the prize for being one of the nicest men in Hollywood. And also, but I really enjoy this post-Saul Goodman career path he's got going on with playing sort of normal guys, but who are also really, really badass and can kick ass whenever they need to. I feel like the two movies...
Yeah, but it's worth noting this is written by Brad Kolstad, who wrote Nobody and Nobody 2, and he also wrote the John Wick film, so I think that gives you an idea of the wheelhouse that we're in here.
Well, it's fantastic. It plays to Bob Odenkirk's skills as an incredibly likeable guy who's come here. He's come here after a sort of unspecified trauma in his past that's left him estranged from his wife, and sort of so he's playing this substitute sheriff, and like you say, a sort of random bank robbery leads him down this, and everything. The first sort of 20 minutes of the film is really fun. They are in a sort of Fargo-esque type Minnesota town. Everything is slightly off. You've seen the beginning, so you know why, but then you're also wondering when Bob Odenkirk, Ulysses, is going to catch up with you, and then when he does, you are not let down by the second half, which is just a chaotic joyous explosion of weaponry and choreography and action, and it's really good.
This film does something really interesting structurally that we've seen in a lot of Ben Wheatley films. So you may remember his film, what was the one that's the one shootout that's 90 minutes long? Free Fire, is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Where his theory was like, what if you have the opening set piece to a film and the characters just never get out of that first opening set piece? And I think he has a really keen eye for doing things that will upend your expectations. So this film has sort of led you to think that there's something weird and suspicious going on in this town, and you think that the film was going to be about him uncovering this, and it unravels so much quicker than I think I was expecting. Like you go from what's the mystery to we know the complete details of the mystery, and now we're just going to make a different film for 45 minutes.
It is a film of two halves because it is again a really tight hour and 28 minutes running time, with some delightful supporting roles as well, particularly from I think Henry Winkler as the town mayor. I really enjoyed him, and also if you want to see inventive deaths, then just get on board with this. And Bob Odenkirk with his luxurious moustache and just sort of general world weariness was just perfect.
And it's not only gruesome deaths, I think also supremely comic,
imaginative, and choreographed really well.
Yeah, it absolutely leans into some slapstick. There's one moment that involves, there's a little bit Final Destination, one of the moments of the film.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Do you have any quick thoughts?
No, I'm just going to say that out of a week where we had to cover a lot of storymen and a lot of them were really awful, this was a great opportunity to just watch one of our, a star who later in life is really coming to his own and in a vehicle that was made for him.
Absolutely, completely agree. That's Normal, a Certificate 15, and it's showing on Amazon Prime. And that's all we have time for today. Please join us again 2 weeks from now on Saturday the 15th of August, where the film releases are starting to flow once again. We have Eli Roth's Ice Cream Man and the sequel to the scariest film I've ever seen with the vertiginous Fall 2 Dead Point. Elsewhere, there's the dinosaur invasion in The End of Oak Street and the much anticipated Anthony Bourdain biopic Tony. But until then, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from our reviewers.
Goodbye. Bye.